Hello, Caleb. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. You like how that transition just went from just talking to, hey, Caleb, how are you?
Very professional.
Super professional. Do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So my name is Caleb Tedros. I am a 26-year-old guy living in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I've been here for nearly 15 years now. And so I met you in college and went to UNC Charlotte. I majored in economics and political science. And from there, I think I was politically involved at UNC Charlotte, and that kind of carried on until after I graduated, where I worked at Bank of America. Well, actually, I initially worked for Hillary's campaign in 2016 for about 2.5, 3 months. So I did the field organizing mainly in West Charlotte. And then the day after that election was my first day at Bank of America. So kind of shifted gears to the corporate world. And then, yeah, from there, I spent a couple years at Bank of America, then Wells Fargo. And throughout that time, I was always politically involved. I, consulted many campaigns here. I was campaign manager for a local race here, and then I decided to run for office. And so I ended up leaving Wells Fargo, um, running for office. Clearly, that didn't go well. So the election was last September. And yeah, from there, I decided to launch a business from there, and I've been essentially, working at my own startup, if you will, for the past, what is it, 6 months now, something like that.
Well, there is so much to unpack there because I want to talk about so many things. And I didn't want to interrupt you because. So, first of all, I didn't know that you were actually a double major in political science.
Oh, yes, yes.
Because if
So,
I remember right, I mean, I remember you were doing economics because I was doing economics. But what made you go into political science?
well, that was my main interest, pretty much. Like I was even in high school, I think, I was in the I went to Harding High School here. I was in the Harding High School Democrats, Model UN. I mean, you name it. I always had an interest in politics. Um, so yeah, so from there, I just went into political science, and then my dad looked me in the eye and said, "You're never going to get a job with that degree," and he was correct. But he studied a bit of economics. And that's what he had majored in. So he suggested it'd be a good idea. And also around that time, it was the financial crisis. I went in like 2012. Actually, this was afterwards. So I just figured, I mean, something that rocked the country this much, I might as well know something about this whole
But I mean,
crisis
it
thing.
sounds like you did get a job with the political science part, right? You were working for Hillary?
Yes, yes. Well, for yeah, about 2.5 months. Yeah. So initially, I kind of wanted to do something. I felt like it was a monumental election, so given that opportunity.
Did what was it like? Because I mean, obviously now we know that she lost, and nobody, well, most people didn't see it coming. Were you surrounded by a bunch of people that were super confident, or what was the feeling like?
Yeah, I mean, we were confident. I mean, even me too. So, so yeah, I mean, I could say even the top, I guess, some of the top advisors did come by the Charlotte office to visit a couple times, and we got the same sentiments. We were all pretty confident that she was going to win. And yeah, I mean, Charlotte, of course, it's a pretty liberal city, so we knew she was going to take
Right.
Charlotte, but North Carolina was a bit debatable. But no, it was shocking. I mean, the night of, like I said, the night of, we went out to the bar to watch the elections live, the entire like office. Um, yeah, we were pretty stunned by the end of the night that she didn't win. I think when she lost North Carolina, I was like, this is a problem because I don't think it was even close.
Did you actually feel confident that North Carolina could go blue?
Confident, yeah. It wasn't a sure thing. Like I wasn't
Right.
surprised. Yeah, I wasn't surprised he took North Carolina just because the
It's
links
North
that.
Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, Obama like had to turn out everyone to win North Carolina.
Right.
Plus the whole gerrymandering thing. I knew it was going to be tougher to vote in the state, so it was always a possibility. I didn't think he would win by that margin.
Do you think, um, obviously, personal opinion, but do you think that there was something that maybe the Hillary campaign could have done differently to maybe have a different outcome? Or was it
Um,
just a wave of red that was inevitable?
I think no and yes. I think that it was one of the luckiest elections that I've ever seen, and everything is, obviously hindsight is 2020, right? And
Right.
so, a part of it was, um, part of it was this red wave that you're talking about. A lot of people just turning out, and whenever you see, especially in politics, the tricky part about politics is whenever you are an incumbent or an incumbent party and you preach about the progress you've made, it's always going to slight somebody who hasn't necessarily made progress.
Absolutely.
So, even though you're out there saying we gave 26 million people health insurance, there are some folks that didn't get health insurance. And like objectively, you can say that something works. But if it didn't necessarily affect you, how did it work? And so I think that played a major part in areas like Michigan and Wisconsin, where you saw a lot of frustrated folks, a lot of obviously white folks that also felt like they necessarily weren't getting catered to by the Democratic Party, and they weren't. I mean, Keith Ellison talks a lot about this, but it's tough. We have to have a different way to talk about race in this country while also being inclusive. Because if you're honestly like a coworker, probably seeing two black folks in your life, you're poor, you don't have health insurance, and you hear somebody saying, you know, somebody saying there's no equality with black folks. They clearly have it harder. Well, I mean, objectively, of course, I think that there is white privilege, and a lot of the studies have come out suggesting that there is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every white person's life is easy. You know,
Right.
so a part of it was that Hillary's inability to really talk that way and talk to folks in that country or in that part of the country. Another part was the Russian scandal. I mean, it's everyone has admitted to it, pretty
Wait,
much,
wait,
except for
which
the top.
scandal?
The social media. So I mean, just the use of bots. I mean, another country
Oh,
really
okay. Yep. The interference in our social media.
exactly that plays a part, and part of it, I would suggest, is I wouldn't say Hillary's fault, but their kind of screw up. I mean, I think she spent maybe 12 million on social media ads. The Trump campaign spent like 80, 90 or something absurd. And
Wow.
so, like, obviously that was incredibly lopsided, and I don't even know how, you know, I don't even know how that was a thing. And so, a multitude of things. And so, yeah, and so I mean, you really didn't see it coming. I think the James Comey thing, him announcing some investigation thing a week before the election.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, like the poll numbers did reflect that. I mean, there was a change, and so like you add all these things together, and the fact that he barely won. I mean, the guy lost the popular vote. So it's one of those things where I think he did get caught up in a perfect storm, but there are, obviously a million things for us to learn from.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I remember there was a picture that showed, I think it was Florida, Wisconsin, maybe Michigan and maybe Pennsylvania, where it was literally saying had X amount more African American or black votes come out in these states, it would
mhm.
have swung
Oh yeah.
from Trump to Hillary. And that was just one little segment, right?
Hmm.
Let alone the white people and the Hispanics and the Asians and all that stuff. But they were like literally just the black vote could have swung the entire election.
Yeah. No, I mean, the
It's
turnout
crazy.
turnout played a big part. I mean, for I think also because we're always comparing things to Obama's election. I mean, that was the most recent, but he had an absurd amount of people show up for his election.
Yeah, 2008 set the record, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
I
mean, as
think.
far as turnout, I think the only time you saw that was, I believe, like Eisenhower or JFK only saw numbers as close as that.
Yeah, it's a good point that you mentioned about having that conversation about race because too often I hear people kind of pinning one side to the other,
Hmm.
as opposed to saying, "Hey, we're all in this together, but let's also acknowledge that there is some bias," which I don't think anybody can deny the bias. It's just kind of ingrained in our system right now, and it's
Hmm.
going to take work to fix that. But saying, "Oh, you know," I've literally heard this a million times, where a white person will say, "Oh, well, if you're a minority, you have a distinct advantage because you'll get a job easier, you'll go to college easier, X, Y, and Z," right?
Hmm.
And then the opposite, right, where a minority will say, "Oh, well, white people will never understand. They got all that white privilege." But it's like, okay, what about people living in trailers that are white, black, Hispanic? It's everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no, I agree. But I mean, there has to be a middle way for us to essentially communicate that to both sides. I mean, I think one thing that Bernie did do is every time he talked about economics, I mean, he appealed to that factory worker or whatever from Wisconsin. I mean, he was able to appeal to these
Right.
folks and essentially say that he understands kind of their plight. And I think,
He literally said, "You are not the enemy," right? Anybody
mhm.
who is a coal worker, anybody who's working, you are not the enemy. We are not attacking you. We are literally just trying to move forward and help everybody move forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And part of it, if you look at it, I think, especially factions of society within the US um, that aren't necessarily educated in the history of the country or even racial relations are inevitably kind of have parts of white privilege underneath. You know what I'm saying? So I think it was similar to there was a story that folks shared with MLK went to jail, and then the prison he was talking to the prison guard, and he literally said to the prison guard like, "Yo, you're white, you barely make any money. So why are you on this side? Why are you with these folks that are against?
Right.
Like you're you might as well be black. You're in the same boat as us."
Yep.
And inevitably, it's this otherism. It's, saying, well, at least I'm with these folks. Even though I don't make any money, and the majority of the time, the Democratic platform is going to do nothing but help me relative to the Republican platform, I'm just going to blame these other folks. At least I belong in this group of folks. And I think that's the problem because if you look at these parts of the country that go for the Republican Party, not even Republican Party, but Trump versus Hillary. Like, it's not in your self interest. I mean, like, to a certain extent, if we're only talking self interest, if you're, a white guy that makes above $350,000 a year, it's okay. I can see why it's in your interest to vote for Republican. But if you're like a coal miner or a person without necessarily a blue collared like American, where unions should be in your best interest or whether government protections should be in your best interest, I'm like, bro, like, what are you saying from their platform that has you so sure that they're going to protect your rights? And that's the one thing that really confused me. But I think the MLK quote kind of summed it up, and it's just this otherism, these immigrants are taking our jobs. It's like, fam, no, they're not. Just these folks that we should ban certain groups of people so that they don't mess with our way of life. So in that way,
Yeah.
it'll make my way of life better. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And from a marketing standpoint, conservatives have done a great job selling this. Making them think that other people are the problem.
It's always easier to say it's somebody else's fault
Yeah.
and to blame someone, than to actually sit down and say, okay, where is society moving, and why are we falling behind?
Hmm.
Um, but I'll be honest, I completely understand where a lot of these conservatives are coming from, whether they're white or not, because, and this is a prime example,
Yeah.
the pandemic hits, people are losing jobs, losing their businesses, losing everything. And what has the government done other than give them $1,200 for 6 months?
Hmm. Exactly.
People rather blame everybody and it just when the government doesn't come through, you you get angry, right? And so
Hmm.
when a Democrat says, "Oh, no, 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 the government will take care of you," and Democrats don't really say that, but it comes off that way. All
Yeah,
of a sudden, they're like, "No, wait a minute, you're going to take care of me? Are you kidding me? You haven't done anything for me,
exactly. Yeah.
so I'm not going to vote with you." And I see a bunch of other people like me voting, you know, to the right or Republican. I'm going to join them because at least I fit in with them, and I know not to trust the government because they haven't done jack shit for me, right? And
Yeah.
it's tough, and it goes both ways. And honestly, I my personal opinion, I wish Hillary would have actually given a message in 2016
Hmm.
instead of, "Hey, if you liked Obama, vote for me." And
Mm.
I felt like she said that way too much.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Well, you're not Obama, and the Republicans hate the Clintons." That's not a good combination.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I guess a couple points. Um, so for the COVID thing, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think the response to COVID has been trash, to
Oh,
be honest.
absolutely.
And this is not only in hindsight. This is, I mean, I think we just got behind masks like 2 days ago. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and part of it, I mean, Trump makes good points, especially about the World Health Organization.
Absolutely.
And damn, unfortunately, it's run by an Ethiopian, so I should be supporting. But come on, I mean, like, yo, I mean, the delay in notifying everyone. I mean, the
Even
absurd, like,
even Dr. Fauci was like, "Hey, don't wear a mask."
yeah, yeah, he had a couple of interviews where he said that. I mean, it's just it's absurd. But if we, and I don't mean to be that guy that points blame, but like
Mhm.
truthfully speaking, if you look at the policies put forth by each party over how to respond to COVID, overwhelmingly the Democrats would have had it right instead of Republicans. I mean, these $1,200 checks. I mean, like they run the Senate and they have the presidency. You know, I mean, we have one branch of the government. They put out a plan in which I think even the current Pelosi plan has us at least paying 2 grand for the next 6 months in order to, to try to keep people in their homes, frankly. Like
Right.
people, I think even Bernie or AOC had said that there should be a moratorium on foreclosures, not foreclosure, a moratorium on mortgages and rent.
Yep.
I mean, like Italy, every civilized nation took these steps because they understood what COVID is like. So I agree, well, 100% that our handling has been trash, but this is something that has been one-sided. There are some complaints that I've heard which are true, which is um, some parts of the country, I think that I believe there were doctors trying to prescribe certain medication that might have fell in line with conservative thinking. So I think
Mhm.
Democrats tried to like prevent them from doing that, which is again stupid.
Right.
Um, but I think I don't know. I think it would be disingenuous to kind of blame both parties on this response because, like, I mean, you've seen Trump. I mean, it's 2 days ago that he even admitted that COVID was real. So it's like,
No,
you know what I'm saying?
I completely agree, dude. For the record, I lean heavily left.
Hmm.
I am not what you would call a Trump supporter.
Hmm.
Um, but I also see it through the eyes of a conservative. They don't
Oh
see
yeah,
Democrat or Republican in government. They see government.
yeah, exactly.
So if you see how broken the government is, and then a
Hmm.
Democrat's going to come in and say, "No, no, 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 we'll help you." It's like, are you kidding me? You're not going to help me. You're just going
Yeah,
to protect people that are not me. And then, like you were saying, the social media aspect of it and the misinformation. I mean, come on, man. Like you and I both know we've seen these ads where it's like they're coming for your guns, they're going to take away your doctor, they're going to do all these crazy radical things, and it's literally just to incite fear, right?
exactly. Yeah. Um, and I was gonna make one more point on like the, I guess, promises from each side. Um,
Mhm.
I think we've unfortunately been having this debate, like the country in general, and it's been every time you get into a political argument, you inevitably go into how much government involvement do you want? Do you the
Right.
government in your life a lot? Do you want it a little bit? But I think to a certain extent that's been the wrong debate that we've been having. And it's like at the end of the day, bro, both political parties want government in your life. And you just need to
Absolutely.
choose in what areas do you want them in your life. Some of the conservative platforms, I mean, they literally want to be in the doctor's office with women. I mean, like they want to control what's going on with a woman's body. That's I don't how how is that not indicative of a big government type play? If you look at the military industrial complex, with how much I guess even government is involved in the corporate part of us going to war. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, how much do they protect these pharmaceutical companies? Like, in order for you to come up with a generic medication, you got to wait for like 40 years, and then whatever company I guess came up with the idea, most of the time it's research from the federal government and NASA. They are allowed to pay the government to delay a cheaper version for it to come out. So it's like I think it's the wrong argument that we've been having, whether you want big government or little government. And don't even get me started with the Exxon and oil companies. That's government being overreaching. You're not a free market guy if you want to give tax credits to Exxon and the rest of these companies. So it's like, okay, where do you want them involved? For me personally, I think that there's a problem with the planet in general with global warming. So I would like the government to be involved in solving this issue. I think that personally think that education can't be done privately right now. And so I would like them to fund education. I think healthcare is a right. I don't think that I just don't. I've never seen an economic model that works for the patient and for a company in the healthcare industry. So I think that the government should be in charge in this realm. So it's like, you got to pick and choose where you want the government involved. And I personally, at this moment, do not think that the government should be involved with Exxon, any oil companies, any pharmaceutical companies, etc.
Yeah, dude, I'm on the same page. But you also, literally, what you just said when you're like, "Oh, the government has to be in charge." Oh my god, that right there is a deal
But
breaker.
why?
Because if you literally told them, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna have tax dollars subsidize doctors and hospitals," people will be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely." Same thing, same thing, but the message is completely different.
Oh
How
yeah,
many
yeah,
times
yeah,
have,
yeah.
have there been people going into Trump rallies and stuff like that, and they're like, "Hey, would you support an Affordable Care Act where X, Y, and Z?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah," and then they're like, they're literally describing Obamacare, right? And they're all for it. And as soon as they say, "But what about Obamacare?" They're like, "Oh no, that's trash. Get it out of here." And it's like, Jesus. So I think that is and obviously, this is just a conversation between you and
Hmm.
I, but dude, I've seen so many Democrats screw up their messaging,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and it's infuriating because it's not like they are literally, this goes back to the poor dude, locking up
yeah.
MLK,
Hmm.
right? Hey man, you are being brainwashed. You're not understanding the issue because they're making it, and at that time, you're either pro black or anti-white,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, it's not like that. We're all in this struggle together, and the sooner we realize that, the sooner we can stop arguing these messaging issues, right? And I don't know, it's a complicated issue. It's a marketing issue because I mean, listen to Trump. That man just says America 15 times in one sentence,
Yeah.
and people don't even know what he said, but he said America, so you got to clap and you got to root for him,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess we've been talking about my frustration with the Republican Party, but with the Democratic Party, it might even be longer. And I mean, it's and spot on what you said with the messaging portion. It's like, and that's the main thing that I kind of got annoyed with Bernie when he kept throwing around socialism. It's like, especially during a campaign, you have a very
Hmm.
small window to inform somebody. The entire time should be used to persuade. So at the same time, you can't sit here and inform somebody of what socialism is while trying to convince them that this is the correct way, especially in the US where we've pretty much
Right.
demonized ideas. I don't know how you demonize an idea, but you know, you can't tell them, hey, social security is socialism. You can't tell them the military, that's socialism. You can't tell them our education is socialism. You know what I'm saying? Medicare. Like somebody said, I think at a rally, get your government hands off my Medicare. What?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That is literally the government money. Like,
Exactly. And you
yeah.
can't sit here and inform them that places like Sweden, Finland, not even them, those are just the best countries, but even somebody with what's considered a mediocre uh, uh, healthcare system like the UK is light years ahead of us. And so it's like you don't have time, and just like you're saying, with the messaging has to be on point, and even things like the Green New Deal. I mean, from a policy perspective, I was for it, but you can't sell $1 trillion package on we're saving the planet. Like people are trying to make it till Monday, let alone is the planet here. You have
Right.
to build it off of an economic argument. You have to say that this is essentially for infrastructure, but green infrastructure. You have to say you're changing the face of our economy, our companies, etc. But you can't sit here and ask for a blank check and say we're going to save the planet. I mean,
1000% agree. And dude, to your point, the Republicans always say, "Oh, well, China is spewing toxins every day. They don't give a shit." Why do we sacrifice X, Y, and Z when China and Russia are doing whatever they want? But what the Democrats should be saying is, okay, true, just like we are, right? We have plants here that are throwing
yeah,
waste, but China is also building some of the biggest solar power factories in the
yeah,
world. And they are investing massively into that space because they know that that's the future. So they want to come out on top. And I wish that people would say that on television more often, right? It's not just, oh, the USA has the responsibility and the USA has to do this. No, it's like, hey, we're falling behind and we cannot afford to fall behind.
yeah. I mean, I just chalk it up to maybe I'm just missing something here, honestly. Because, bro, these coal miners, there are maybe two coal miners left. I mean, I'm being facetious, but come on now. I get it from a
Yeah.
political perspective. Why? Because you want to have a fighting chance at West Virginia, but most importantly, you want Virginia, and there are a couple folks that you want there to vote for you. But it's like economically speaking, their job is gonna disappear one way or another. It's out of here in the next 5 years. On top of that, if you were to open up a plant, I mean, I don't know if solar could work there, but any form of alternative energy, their job has like a 75% chance of being here for the next 30 years. Like economically speaking, it's not even close. A job, you would want a job in renewable resources. So it's like I'm looking at Democrats like, okay, so while Obama was there, the past 4 years, you guys have had an opportunity, even for a political reason, to introduce some kind of alternative energy company there, and to show the folks that live there that, yo, like you like you don't have to live, you don't have to have a job in where in 30 years you're probably gonna have cancer because of the job, or
Right.
if
Right.
it's here in 30 years. You know what I'm saying? Like you've had the opportunity. And now we wait until now. And now we see Joe getting up there saying, like, I'm not against fracking. It's like, bro, fracking is one of the worst things you can do to the environment. But like I get it from a political reason. Like you can't sit here and just lose
Yeah.
Virginia. But it's like you had 6 years to educate these people. Like off season campaigning is for educating them. That way the persuasion during campaign season could be a lot easier.
Well, I think, and this is where I agree with anybody, whether you're right or left, when you say the government is
Hmm.
broken. Um, Flint, Michigan. How many politicians have said, "Oh, what's happening here is a disgrace. This is America. We're gonna fix things. We're gonna fix the water. We're gonna whatever, right?" And I'm 99% sure, but if you go there today, you still can't drink the
Yep,
water.
you're correct.
And so, same thing with those little towns, right? That are coal mining towns. Oh, no, 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 no. We're going to move to the future. we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then nothing
Hmm.
happens. Nothing happens. And then all of a sudden you hear Republicans or the opposite side say, "Well, they're just trying to take your jobs." And they're like, "Well, yeah, because this is all I have. Why wouldn't I vote in favor of trying to quote unquote keep my job?" Um it's it's sad, but the government, in my personal opinion, is absolutely broken, and it's in danger of falling apart, especially after Amy Comey Barrett getting appointed to the Supreme Court. She got confirmed, and that there's going to be so many lawsuits already, filing up to try and tear down any sort of anti-conservative laws that they think exist.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, man. It's not it's an entertaining time, but I mean, if you are somebody who's fallen victim to some of this, it's crazy, and especially like having started a business and just informing myself of what it really takes to run kind of an organization. Obviously, I'm not that big, but just understanding, you realize how much waste there is in government bureaucracies.
Absolutely.
And it's just like there is literally a stereotype for DMV workers, the fact that they're rude because they can't get fired. And that stereotype is correct. Like, you know how hard it is to get a
Right.
government employee? Like, they're not sitting here doing quarterly one on ones or end of year one on ones to dictate how hard they've been working. I'm not sure where you're at now, but bro, you know that there were people at Bank of America who did nothing, who probably should have been fired because the
Absolutely.
organization is just too big. So imagine the U.S. government. Like, how in God's
Yep.
name do you track? So, I mean, I definitely understand when folks talk about government waste and like large parts of the government being inefficient. I 100% agree. And so, and part of those were places like Flint. I mean, for you to even change anything, like the loopholes you need to change with anything government related is just absurd.
Yeah, it's I don't want to talk the whole time about this depressing stuff
Yeah.
about how everything is broken, but I do want to touch on the fact that you ran for office, and can you remind me exactly what position you were running for, and what was it like actually being a citizen and saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to step up and I'm going to try and help, the greater good in my community."
Yeah, no, so it was quite the experience, but so this was City Council District 3. And so this pretty much covered up the west side of City Council. So it's the largest district in the city. And I went to high school in that area and had volunteered in that area. And the city council member that was the person I was looking to replace, I actually worked for her, and I was her intern, and I turned into her campaign manager later on. And so when she told me she was stepping down, I figured, I had enough experience in the community relative to other folks that were running, or even relative to other folks that were in city council. So I, kind of decided to put my foot in the race.
Or how can I ask this? Was there a challenge or an obstacle for you to throw your hat into the race? And could anybody literally just say, "Hey, you know what? I also want to compete to represent this district"?
Yeah, yeah. So folks can definitely. I mean, like as long as you met certain criteria, which I think you just have to live in the district for a year. Um, but yeah, you can go ahead and run if you'd like. And so it was a challenge. I mean, like I knew the political landscape of the city and of that district. I mean, there was neighborhood meetings I went to for 3 4 years, just getting to know the folks in the community. And so there were specifics. So you're just asking like general problems I had and stuff I learned in the election, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, right?
yes,
Because a lot of the
yeah.
times, who would ever run for office, but you have. So I'm curious about all the ins and outs, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I mean it was definitely a challenge, and because I was working at Wells Fargo. So here's the thing about Charlotte. We're one of the only major cities that classify city council and the mayorship as a part-time job. So it pays like 15, 16 grand
A
um,
year.
a year. And so in order to yeah. So a lot of times folks on city council, they're oftentimes retired. Um, a lot of times they're lawyers. So their law firm has to sign off on them working there. Some of them come from the real estate development, and I'm sure you can guess why it would be beneficial for a real estate development company to have somebody in city council. So yeah, so a lot of them, or they just come from wealthy families, or a husband or a spouse that has money. So what one of those criteria is, but essentially that was done earlier on to kind of prevent certain groups of people who couldn't necessarily afford to do it full time from holding that position. So it's the same thing in the General Assembly. So I had to maintain my position at Wells Fargo, which I couldn't really do for long, and that's a long story. But um, so I worked at Wells Fargo, and then pretty much got a team together. I had a treasurer, a couple of interns that were helping me out, a couple of advisors, folks that were helping me make decisions with the campaign. And a lot of them was really hitting the campaign trail. I mean, knocking on these doors, going to debates, um, a couple of podcasts just like this, and just meeting as many people as you can from the district. And so, um, yeah, yeah. So I mean, the experience. The thing is, I've done it before running other campaigns, but I had never done it as a candidate. And so, part of the tricky part was it just A is the consistency. I mean, you're getting off of work at 5, and then from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, you're at some events or you got to do something. And then Saturdays come on for 14 hours. You better be knocking on doors while you have sunlight, and
Wow.
Sunday. And so yeah, it was tricky. I mean, because I mean, I don't have a spouse, and I still needed to maintain a job. But for the first, uh, the majority of the campaign, I was still working at Wells Fargo.
So most people that are running for office in one fashion or another are a little bit not, you know, substantially financially stable, but they have some sort of financial advantage. If you're working from 9 to 5 and someone who doesn't have to work from 9 to 5, they have all day to work on their campaign, right?
Exactly. Yep.
That's tough. And well, what about the financing? Were there laws or rules about financing a city council position? And did you have to raise a lot of money? How did that aspect work?
Yeah, so we raised a good amount. I think I mean, so as far as the rules, I mean, you could pretty much just fundraise from whoever. I think there has to be a max of 1,200 to 1,300 dollars. And obviously you have to do a campaign finance report every 3 4 months, and all of it is public. But we ended up raising, I believe, close to 11,000, $12,000, something like that. We were significantly behind our competitors. Um, but yeah, I mean, just trying to do it on a smaller budget, and you're just kind of clawing away, especially at the local level. I mean, a lot of times the big contributors, especially in Charlotte, are real estate companies.
Mm,
And so, ethically, it is kind of tricky because in the beginning part, just working in city council for a while, I had a lot of relationships with folks who were in the development industry, real estate development industry. And so, there were a lot of talks in the beginning, but as you kind of think about it, I mean, you don't want to be attached to anybody really, because if you think
right.
about it, this guy from this development company gives you a check for $1,200 for you to campaign for your election. Let's say you win. 3 months later, he has a project coming up and he needs city council to approve it. I mean, come on. It's like, obviously, uh, there are areas for corruption, and I feel like I just don't understand how that's not considered corruption.
Yeah, it's funny what we call corruption and
Exactly.
what we don't call corruption.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, so I mean, so along the campaign though, talk to a lot of different folks, especially our district is one of the most diverse. So I mean, you're literally like you're in the hood of places where it's lower income, talking to folks, and then 20 30 minute drive in another part of the district, you're talking to the most affluent folks in the city. And so that's that dichotomy of having two different Charlottes and trying to have a campaign plan that worked to uplift really everyone. And so that's
Yeah,
kind of what you run into.
that had to be difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, to a certain extent, especially in the beginning. but I think at the end of the day, when your life gets easier if you're just genuine about every political point. Like if I was catering to a certain group of folks, it would be hard for me to carry that message to folks who seem like they're on the opposite side of life,
Right.
whether it's income or anything else. But if this is my genuine opinion, like no matter who's asking, I could just give my genuine opinion. You know what I'm saying? So it's like at the end of the day, and once you get to know some of these folks, like especially at the local level, bro, like things aren't like we're not talking about social issues or abortion where it's tougher to convince folks otherwise. You know, you're at the end of the day, we want companies to move here. We want jobs for our folks here. We want the police department funded. We want our kids, to be safe. We want good education for all. I mean, they seem so generic, but oftentimes folks do agree a lot more, especially on the local side. So that part wasn't too hard. Oftentimes it was, especially at a heavily Democratic district, it's just uh, having differing points with the people that you're running against. Oftentimes you hear the same message for everyone. So you wanted to speak in a way to say, like, this is why I'm running, and their points might be similar to mine, but my experience is different, my sentiments are different, my background is different, and so it's making that case across the entire district, which was um, kind of the hard part.
And when you were running, it was a primary?
Yes, so in the primary.
How I know you just said that, experience and everything else is kind of how you can differentiate yourself, but if there was one thing that you tried to kind of shoot across to say, "Hey, I know all of these other people are they were all Democrats, right? That you were running against Democrats."
Yes.
What was the one thing that you tried to focus on? What message to kind of differentiate yourself?
One thing I tried to focus on was my experience in the district. So the past 3 4 years, I had gone to the majority of all neighborhood meetings, community meetings,
Mhm.
um, even neighborhood cleanups. Like I had been there, partially because I was also working for the council member before me. But even after I stopped working for her, I wanted to continue to stay involved because you grew relationships with these people.
Right.
So I think if I was to do it again, I would not focus on that because
Really?
yes, because part of so I would so there's a couple of takeaways that I learned for myself personally and from a campaign standpoint. Um, the biggest thing is you just have to win based off of ideas. I at the end of the day, I think I still ran the best race in terms of ideas. I had specifics, and the debates would show that, frankly. But once you're pushing experience and you're the youngest person running, like so
Mm,
if I would have won that election, I would have been the youngest council member in Charlotte's history. So it's
wow.
hard. Yeah, so it's hard making the case that you're running with experience because people oftentimes mistake an age for experience. I'm
Yep.
like, because there are people in city council right now who moved here 3 years ago. So it's like, but I mean, they've got some age on them. So
Yep.
it's never really a question. So one thing I probably wouldn't have, emphasized my experience in it because honestly, I had been warned. I had a conversation with Harvey Gantt, and he was the first black mayor of Charlotte. He's also the first black man to ever attend Clemson. And
Wow.
so yeah, the Gantt Museum is named after him. Um, so he's a big deal, but we spoke it. I told him the same thing. I'm running on experience. And he literally laughed. He was like, bro, like you don't have facial hair. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, but the thing, he wasn't saying it like from his perspective. He was telling me like, this is the reaction you're going to get. And he's right.
Right.
Especially the, where I learned the most was honestly like 2 weeks before the election. Once the polls opened up, I worked the polls every day. And so um, I was able to work all day. So at that time, I was not at Wells Fargo. And so I, can't quite talk about that for legal reasons, but I was working full time. I was working full time on the campaign for the last maybe month and a half. And so being there every single day before somebody walks in to make their vote and you're trying to talk to them about politics, you realize that some folks really get fixated on your age. And that's the majority of the
Right.
comments that I got is your age. Um, yeah, I had some random lady go in about my last name. Like, you're a foreigner. We don't need more foreign
Really?
folks in office. Oh, yeah.
To your
And so,
face.
oh, to my initially it was to a guy who was working for my campaign, and he like had called and he's like, "There's a lady over here." I was like, "Well, I'm about to be there in 2 minutes," but yeah, she talked to me in my face. Then she talked about my age, and I'm just like, bro. And that's the biggest pushback that I got, whether it was seeking office, really. Um, some of the even I mean, back in the day when I was even interning for the council member, I mean, I was her campaign manager, and I was like 1 year removed from college, and so it's like, I mean, I get it, but there is a difference between experience and age. But one thing, like, even if I do think so, like, the voters aren't going to think so. And at the end of the day, it's like you're marketing for for a company, like you're marketing for the voter. So you don't necessarily want to push that.
Out of curiosity, in those debates, did you ask them where they went to high school?
No, no, and and that's the thing. Like, so I'm a very,
Out of like, man, shut up! You just moved here.
yeah, bro. Like, yeah, there were definitely things that you wanted to say, but you don't, because I've seen other candidates say these things, and you're like, God, they make a good point, but they seem like an ass right now. And sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but it's just not a good look. And so, and part of it is my nature. You can tell there is a distinct difference between the way I debated the first couple of months versus like one of my last debates. And I think it's to the point you're saying where it's like, we're at the end, let's just be honest here. And I was a lot more frank. And just being my
Yeah,
first campaign, I sort of, and I'm by nature not very confrontational. So I'm like very laid back and pretty chill about things. So it kind of took me some time to get into the swing of the campaign, and just like you said, articulating your position isn't enough. You got to be able to smack folks around,
yeah, you gotta slap it in
figuratively.
their face. I mean, I hate to say it, but look at Trump, man.
Exactly, bro.
He literally was the opposite of your nice, hey, look at me, I'll take care of you. No, he was the opposite. He was
Hmm.
like, no, look at these jokers, right? These are all
Exactly.
politicians. Screw them. His wife is ugly. He's got whatever. And people are like, all right, he's being honest. And yeah,
No, I mean, if there's one thing that he taught is political correctness and quote unquote a politician, there's literally no such thing. Man, because I
right.
get into conversations now with, folks that are running for Congress and Senate, and some of their folks ask for my opinion on things, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know if I definitely was like this, but folks are detached, bro. That's not how the real world works. Like,
Right.
nothing is more disturbing than seeing Ted Cruz when there was that video of him rehearsing how to kiss his wife on stage. Like, bro, like, come on now. People can see when you're not being genuine.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
it's like, and is on the Democratic side, I didn't see a single debate this entire season until Trump and Biden's last debate. I had turned my
Really?
computer. Yeah, I mean, I turned my TV on like 8 months ago during the primaries, and as soon as I turned it on, partially I was probably just butthurt. I just lost the election. I didn't want to hear it, but like, I heard Kamala was like, "See, nobody wants us throwing food at each other. People want to know how we're going to put food on their plate." And I turned the TV off, and I'm like, people have got to be able to see through these like clearly overly auditioned one-liners that
Yes.
nobody really cares
Yes.
about. And that, I mean, I
Yes.
don't, and it's not a place for you to get any kind of substance. So I really don't watch debates. But it's like, I mean, that's what politics has become. But I'm glad that Trump is calling. Like, one line that had me a little shook during the last debate is, "Oh, like, Joe, he's looking at the camera, he's talking to you and your family, the typical politician thing." I'm like, bro, he's right. Right? You picked a very bad time to say this, but he's right.
1,000% right. No, I have talked to people that have literally told me, "Oh, I learned X, Y, and Z watching the debate." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? If you're learning something through a debate, then you haven't been paying attention for way too long."
Hmm.
Because if you're going to vote for either or, you kind of have to know where they stand and what they're gonna do.
Exactly.
Um, and when people tell me, "Oh, I learned this," I'm like, "Dude, are you kidding me? You gotta
Yeah,
wake up." But unfortunately, that's where our society lives, right?
exactly.
Where they like these sound bites and little things, and that's why politicians do that, right? That's why politicians don't want to be real. They want to be fake and look as perfect as possible when in reality, what person is perfect?
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
what Trump is, running on. Hey, I'm not
hmm
perfect, but I'll tell you the truth. And people are like, "Yep, 1000% in."
And on top of that, you don't owe. This is what I hate when people. My pet peeve is when people apologize for something and they're not actually sorry. It's like you're more so disrespecting me. Like recently, our senator Cal Cunningham got caught in a texting scandal, which
Oh yeah.
it's like, I mean, he's a moron. He is. But at the same time, it is your personal business. Like it's none of our bro. Like what?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, people don't want to see you come up there and like apologize and then fake like, oh, I care about my wife. Actually, come on now. Like, ain't nobody trying to hear that. My advice to even folks on his campaign was, bro, don't apologize. Just go on there and be like, this is a private matter. Like, if I was losing in the polls too, and I was Tom Tillis, of course I would make an issue out of this. Or oh, like, I mean, if I was Tom Tillis, I wouldn't want to talk about the economy either. Of course, I'll talk about this texting thing. Don't
Exactly.
sit there and continuously apologize. Like everyone is like, we get it. We're just like we elected Trump. Evangelicals elected Trump. Like Liberty University, like Franklin Graham, quote unquote, these Christians elected Trump. Like morality is out of the window. We just want to hear your response to this. Like
Right.
if you are sorry, then we're gonna feel like you did something bad.
Yep. Yep.
So it's like come on now.
Yeah, the best way to come out of that one is to just be like, "Hey, thank you for the privacy during this private matter," and move on.
Exactly. This is between me and my wife. That's it. It really is. Like we have no business in their life. Like who are we to make comments? Like, I mean, I don't know what folks would do if they heard about like the Italian political like program to see how folks are treated. Like politicians. I mean, there are folks openly having an affair and just daring you to say something about it.
This happening in Italy?
Yeah, I mean, their former president Berlusconi. I think he's trying to make a comeback, but like, I'm pretty sure the guy was on coke his entire time he's on prime minister. And I mean,
That's
like
incredible.
yeah, he like got accused of being with like a 16-year-old. Like, I mean, this guy was a savage. I mean, that stuff is illegal and is wrong. But like, as far as like worrying about people's personal lives, I think the Europeans do a lot better job being like, bro, just take care of this country. Like, we don't care what's going on in your house.
Absolutely, I completely agree. This is part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is because you're smart, you're reasonable, you're down to earth, and you have experience, right? And you can see through the whole facade of,
hmm
oh, this guy, at one point did drugs. It's like, okay, cool, but that was who cares, right?
Yeah.
Where is he gonna? What is his policy? What does he want to move forward on? What does he want to do to make a better life for the general public? And people just get, depending on who it is, they try and get fixated, which is part. I hate getting back into this, but a lot of people don't attack Trump on his policies. They just attack him on stupid stuff. Oh, well, one time he said this, and one time
hmm
he said that. And it's like, okay, cool. But what are his policies? What is he doing that's either helping or hurting? Don't tell me about how much makeup he has on. I don't care.
Exactly. I mean, like, I think I saw this ad where I think Dr. Biden, so Joe Biden's wife, said something on the ad. She was like, "Morality is on the ballot." It's like that's dead. It's dead, bro. Like,
People still like to make that argument, man.
yeah, but I mean, like, once things are so preposterous that you can't, like, I cannot wrap my head around some of the things that Trump says in a speech, where you literally can't let your kids listen to some of it. You know what I'm saying? And that's something wrong. But the fact that you know that that's wrong and people are still voting, as a person who works with a campaign, you should know, okay, this is just where society is. Like,
Right.
they are correct that morality is like he's not a Mitt Romney or George Bush. This is not because I'm against Republicans. This is because he's just like gross. He's a gross guy. But like that's not gonna work because everybody's like, listen, I mean, everybody's gross.
Yeah, and again, this is where he goes and says, "Hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm gonna help you." And people are like, "Okay, cool."
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, bro.
As opposed to the politicians who are trying to pretend to be as perfect as possible, and then the one time they screw up, everyone's like, see, he lied. He lied."
Exactly. I mean, yeah. Hopefully, people come to the realization. I mean, I started to figure out, especially late in the campaign. I was just like, oh, this is pretty much like a sham. This is because I mean, part of the reason why I did really run is for that reason. When I was interning in college at city council, uh, there were debates that I was present for, like especially in the back rooms, between my boss and a couple of conservative city council members. And when I say it was moronic arguments that they were making, like at that time, I was like, yo, this is city council. Like, I mean, this is like, even though he's a Republican, like he's a city council member. Like these people are the smartest that we have in the city, leading our city forward. Blah blah blah. I sat through that argument. I was like, what in God's name is this? What is that man talking about? And like, and same with Democrats. There are some points that I hear them make. I mean, that I'm just sitting there like, what are you talking about? And so it's towards the end of my like um, kind of run that I realized like some of the folks that we prop up, no matter their political party, are literally the reason why we have some of these problems.
Yes.
So it's like, why for what am I like really covering for these folks? Or like why am I not saying some of the things that I really believe in instead of falling in line to a certain point with some of these stances?
Yeah,
And
and it's tough, right? Because people eat stuff like that up all the time.
yeah, I mean it's like bro, when I had changed my mind about like taking money from development firms, like I had relationships with a lot of developers, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, it's not you personally, but you have to be able to see the problem here. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, this is pretty obvious, sir. And it's like, you see that throughout city council, even for folks with D's right next to their name. I'm like, you work for a development firm. Like, what are you talking about? How could you, like, defend any of this? Like, this is so past the point of serious political talk or serious policy exchanges. I mean, at a certain point, I'm like, bro, so like, okay, so why am I really defending this person? So not even necessarily defending this person, but so why is the establishment or whatever like defending this type of person?
Yeah, I am a firm believer that government and the laws and all that stuff has not kept up.
Oh, for
There
sure.
are so many loopholes that both parties take advantage of. And, that's one of the main reasons that I was a Bernie guy, right? Because he's kind of calling a lot of those out,
Exactly. Yeah.
saying, hey, it's not about Republican or Democrat anymore. It's about the broken system that we need to fix.
Hmm.
And I'm not voting for Trump, but I am scared of a Biden presidency in those terms where he doesn't fix anything.
Hmm.
He gets elected, and people automatically think that everything is fixed.
Yeah.
But the reason that Trump won and the reason that Democrats don't get stuff done and all of these problems, it still exists.
Hmm.
And people just, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't. I mean, like, trust me, I'm not overly enthusiastic for going to vote for this guy. I mean, I think, like, even people are roasting. I see Joe Rogan pretty much got a whole group of people thinking that the man has dementia. Like, I get it. I've seen his speeches. He is not as quick as he used to be.
The man is like 78 years old. Why would we elect him to control the fucking world?
Yeah, I mean, like, I get it. I get it. But man, especially a lot of folks on my side of the political spectrum sat out of the Trump race because of, Hillary was a mediocre candidate. And I'm like, the lesser of two evils kind of argument.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, there's just no such thing though. I don't think there's such thing as the lesser of two evils. There's just who's
Right.
better and who's worse. Because like, I mean, like, I think Obama's was one of the best presidents we had in the, probably in the near past, the past 50 years maybe,
Yeah, in the modern era, yeah.
in the modern era. But I can name a litany of things that he did wrong, and not only
Oh,
wrong, but like cost
absolutely.
people's lives. I mean, the things like innocent people in Palestine and all over the Middle East have to worry about his drones. I mean, he deported more people than any U.S. president. I mean, there's a litany of things he did wrong. But
Yeah.
and that's where people just need to understand nuance and just at the end of the day, which one is better and which one is worse. That's it.
Yeah,
Because
and
the
that's a
only time you're going to agree 100% is the day that you put a check mark next to your name.
yeah, without a doubt. That's an excellent point. Yeah, and that's a tough pill to swallow this election, especially for me because I don't like Joe Biden. I don't like his lack of enthusiasm for the future. I think he's doing the bare minimum to just
Hmm.
not be Trump. But I will swallow that pill and end up casting a vote for him just because you're right. It's not about the lesser of the two evils, but who's actually better at this point. And
Hmm.
I don't know if I can continue voting that way, uh, but for now, I will swallow that pill. Before I let you go, though, two quick questions for you.
Yep.
One of them, I know this is running a little long, but how, Black Lives Matter. That whole thing has been politicized beyond belief. How can we make Black Lives Matter less political and make everybody kind of see the actual message for what it is? And I don't know, like, how can we just make it a more clear message? Is, I guess, my question.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as the overall messaging goes, I think we need to be very strategic in our local efforts. So here's one of the biggest fallacies I've seen with people's, I guess, assessment of Black Lives Matter. At the end of the day, it's a national movement.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You can't control a national movement. It's always going to be politicized because policy itself is politicized. The bus boycotts and Wilmington counter protests and
Hmm.
um, just the many things during the 60s that took place. I mean, the history books obviously get it right, but during that time, there were many negative depictions of what was going on in Birmingham, what was going on in Detroit, what was going on in Wilmington, in Alabama. And so part of that is just the understanding like, okay, there are folks that are against this idea. I mean, at that time, it was radical black folks who are just looking over to take our towns. You already have the right to vote. What do you mean civil rights active vote? You have housing. Why do you need a right to housing? Or why
You're
why do we
getting
need to?
education, right? So why blaming
So
people?
exactly. So it's the same thing. Whenever you have a national movement, there are people going to be on the opposite side. So what we can do to move forward is, like I said, at the local level, ensure that we're being strategic. And like in Charlotte, for instance, I mean, they essentially banned funding. Uh, I believe it was smoke grenades and rubber bullets.
Mm.
Now, but I mean, Black Lives Matter literally had a change in policy. Like they're just not out here screaming or whatever. On top of that, to mistaken Black Lives Matter as a couple individuals, specific individuals, like that, to my best knowledge, there is no head of Black Lives Matter. And if it was found that he was doing something wrong, like that's what conservatives try to do. You can't character assassinate an entire movement. You're just assassinating that character. Like they'll be I. And so it's like I get it, but I think one of the things is you have to be specific in the policies that you want, and they do have a national platform. However, but a lot of like policies for the police are done at the local level. So we need to have specific efforts done because you don't want this to be an Occupy Wall Street movement,
Right.
you know?
No, and that's you're making a very valid point because something that I was thinking about earlier was where is that unified message?
Yeah.
Um, because I think of the civil rights movement of decades ago, and you think of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X as the two big heads, right?
Hmm.
And they're the ones who are meeting with the president. They are the ones who are speaking on behalf. of millions.
Yeah.
And then I think about the Black Lives Matter movement today, and I'm thinking, man, the loudest thing you hear is defund the police. And, I'm all for Black Lives Matters, but man, if I'm in trouble, I want to call the police and I want to have someone there to like help.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, so it's a very mixed message almost. And when you talk to people, most people will say, no, 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 we're not going to defund them, right? We just mean allocate more resources to the communities that need them.
Hmm.
And I'm like, man, I wish you had a better slogan, because you talk to anybody who knows a cop or of a friend of a cop or anything, and you're gonna say, oh, you're gonna take away their money, you're gonna take away their protection, you're gonna take away everything, automatically against it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the tricky part about. Okay, so I guess a couple points. So in the '60s, it was a lot easier to control messaging. Like MLK and Malcolm X were deemed the biggest parts of the movement because the only way to get your information was through the radio and the television. But
This is true.
now, once we have social networks where you have like um, essentially thousands of quote unquote leaders. One thing I agree 100% with your marketing, the defund the police. If you actually read the specific policy changes that they would like for defund the police, I haven't found a single thing that I disagree with. But coming from a guy who went to neighborhood meetings in a lower income part of
Right.
the city, like if you went to neighborhood meetings, there's a community cop there at every single meeting, and he has the best relationships with that community. And so
Mm,
they want that cop to be there. Like they want
right.
that relationship with that cop. Oftentimes I'm very hesitant, and Cory Booker made a very good point, but I'm very hesitant because some policy changes come from very well-to-do liberals who don't understand urgency or anything. They don't,
Absolutely.
and that's again annoying. So I agree with defund the police, but especially during that time, man, especially during a radical time, you just needed something that were gonna get people's attention. And so
A
I mean,
rallying cry.
yeah, and so like I mean, I guess so is so I guess at the end of the day, okay, is it more what do you think, Pablo, in your personal opinion? Do you think it's more effective to say defund the police? No, what are you talking about defund the police? No, we don't actually mean it, and then you have the conversation. Or previously suggesting, hey, there's too much money in the budget allocated to cops, so let's look for these other avenues. So just if you're just looking at, I guess, effectiveness, like getting people to the table.
Obviously, defund
Mhm.
police.
Mhm.
Obviously. But if you don't want to scare away a lot of people, you don't say, I'm going to take away your protection.
Yeah. So no, I agree, and so I like I said, I'm not for defunding the police. Excuse me, I'm for defund the police, the movement.
Right.
Um, but like, bro, in Charlotte, for instance, 2.5% of our budget is allocated to affordable housing, when I think like 51 to 60% is allocated to CMPD. And so here's the part you play. But then again,
Reform.
I'm not. Yeah, but I'm not saying like pay cops lower. Like I went on a ride
Right.
along. Like bro, like they have the hardest job like in society. Period.
Absolutely.
But and that's part of the problem where we're asking you to be a social worker, we're asking you to be a psychologist, a therapist.
All of the above.
Yeah, and so like I agree with the idea of like why don't we allocate more money to social workers so that they can, if you get a call for like I don't know domestic violence or some shit, social it would behoove you to take a social worker. The problem comes, where do you get the funding? And I guess and that's where the headache is, to have enough funding. But like I mean they do make great points that there are some calls that cops shouldn't have to go to. Like I went on, we had a domestic violence call, but it was clear like the poor guy, the cop doesn't have training for this, and he knows it, and he's sitting here just getting yelled at by the husband. And I'm like, bro, like there should be a therapist or a social worker that's called for this. If you're gonna send anybody.
Right. That's a perfect example of where a police officer should be, but
Hmm.
only to protect the social worker.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Social
I
worker
agree.
shows up. does their thing, and the cop is there just to make sure nothing goes out of control.
Yeah, I mean, and social workers trained for this. I mean,
Yep.
we can train cops as much as we want, but I mean, military academy is like how long? You're asking them to be a social worker in that same time frame.
Right.
And talk that you have to increase pay. I mean, any other, yeah, I mean, you have an economics background. If you want the best employees, you have to pay them. And so,
Absolutely.
like, what they do in Charlotte, and they get their training for a year or two in Charlotte, and then they dip out. 66% of CMPD lives outside of Charlotte.
That's
Uh,
insane.
and then you wonder why they don't have connections with the community. Because I mean, it's just psychological, bro. If you live in an area, you're gonna want to take care of it, a bit more. And
This is
so,
why you ask them, "Where did you go to high school?" And then you can say that you went to high school in that district.
exactly.
No, I completely agree, man. I am 1000% for reforming the police because you're right. They're doing too much. And it is one of the most difficult jobs, if not the most difficult jobs in this country today.
Hmm.
And it's easy to stir the pot with defund the police, and it's once you say that, man, a lot of people stop listening, and that's the sad part. Is That's what I worry about a lot.
But were they
Is
listening anyways? I guess is my question.
Oh, that's another very valid point, right?
Yeah.
They're very heavily on one side, and
And I'm with you. I'm literally in this middle position about the marketing portion. Like people will say, abolish the police. You've never lived in the hood. You've never lived in a third world country. You don't quite understand law and order clearly. So
right.
I'm definitely not for that. But I believe that there is a middle piece because on the other side is the whole thing with looting. Obviously, looting is bad, but bro, you guys have been quiet. Like, what have you guys been doing the past couple of decades where folks have been living under this? Like
Yep.
what we've talked about police reform for God knows how long. Rodney King was God knows how long. That
Right. Right.
same like come on now. So it's like I feel for these folks that are trying to change it up, and it's like, oh, folks are getting mad at defund the police. Well, at least they're feeling some kind of emotion. At least they're understanding something. So I think I've been leaning. Yeah, what was that?
No, go ahead. You've been leaning what?
No, I've been leaning more towards that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the documentary that I saw. I think it's like LA 92. I
Mm,
think that's on Netflix. I don't
hmm.
remember. But it's exactly what you just mentioned. They start off the documentary by talking about the riots in Los Angeles in like 1969 or something like that, something like a long time ago.
Yeah,
And they're like, yeah, a white cop, beat a Negro. And I mean, this is literally a newscast, right?
yeah,
And they're talking about it and stuff like that. And then they fast forward to 1992 to the Rodney King incident, and exactly the exact same thing happens, right? And it's like,
yeah.
wait a minute, what happened to that gap where we were supposed to do better, where we were supposed
Mm,
to do better, reform and pass new laws and protection? Nothing happened, right? And that was from I'm probably way off by saying 69, but 69 to
yeah,
92. Now think about 92 to 2020. What happened?
exactly.
What happened? Like, where is the change? Where is the reform? Where are the people willing to stand up and do things? And um, the best defense for defund the police and all of this stuff that is being all the rhetoric that is thrown out there was done by my friend Tamika Williams.
Mm,
I had her on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, and she literally said, "Hey, sometimes you just got to shoot for the stars, and you'll be happy to land on the moon, right?
mm,
You got to go big or go home,
yeah,
and
exactly.
and even if you miss, you're gonna get something out of it." And
Hmm.
so she's like, "Good for them for being as loud as possible, because you're not gonna get everything, and you're
Yeah,
not gonna get those social workers, and you're not gonna get all this stuff. But maybe, just maybe, like in Charlotte, you can get rid of funding for certain weapons that probably shouldn't be used, right?"
bro, they're literally like the Geneva Conventions make it an international crime to use it in times of warfare. Like you're not allowed to use smoke bombs.
But you can use it on your own people who are protesting.
Exactly. It's
That's
crazy. And usually the counter is like, well, they might need the defense one day. I'm like, oh yeah, if we're being invaded, go ahead, sure. But until then, I've only seen it in the negative. Like I've never once like saw it help. Like it's doing more harm than good. So clearly, I mean, you just don't need it. Come on now.
Yeah, no, I've witnessed a couple of protests or riots, whatever you want to call them. Once in Charlotte, once obviously here in New York,
Hmm.
and I you don't need that much artillery or heavy stuff. I think what you need is a strong presence and strong communication,
Hmm.
and that'll get rid of most of the things.
Hmm.
And if there is looting and there is all these things, hey man, I don't think you can't go around shooting everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, okay, cool, we're gonna have to suffer this pain, and the government should definitely give the money back to all the businesses that got affected, right? You give
Exactly.
whatever they lost, the government needs to pay them, and then say, okay, why did this happen, and how can we prevent it in the future?
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, no, I know this podcast has gone really long, but
No, no, you're fine, man. Yeah, yeah.
one last question. Prediction for November 3rd and onward, because God knows how long they're going to be counting the votes.
Oh boy. Man, I'm trash at predictions, but I think that Biden gets this, and it's not even close. And I think, um, man, whenever they count, I don't know. We're definitely gonna have a winner by that night. By winner, I mean there's gonna be a projected winner, like every
You
other
think
election.
so?
Oh yeah, projected winner. Yeah, I mean, technically, in every election, it takes days for us to actually count the votes.
Right, right.
Um,
But the media
However,
usually projects, right?
exactly, yeah, yeah. But I'm hoping that it's such a landslide to where like it's safe for them to kind of project it. And I think, I mean, the numbers, especially now, is headed towards that way, especially in areas like Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia. So I think Biden gets it. Now, what happens legally? Because both of them have spent like 3 million on each side on lawyers.
Lawyering up.
Yeah, bro. Like, so what's gonna happen afterwards? I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, this might be like, 2000 Florida in like 6 different states. So at the state level, yeah. Um, Plus, I mean, bro, once these numbers are looking that bad, and somebody like Trump who doesn't have a moral compass, I really don't know what's going on with some of these like what is it, the mail in ballots.
Right.
So whether they make it in, whether they don't make it in, what the count is the Supreme Court going to have a voice in this? I mean, all that is crazy. And if he does lose, I'm very curious to see how he finishes his term, because that's probably even going to be more interesting than anything else, especially with what Michael Cohen's been talking about.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on this one. In terms of a landslide,
Hmm.
I I was talking to my good buddy Robbie, and I was telling him there's three pillars that are going to doom Trump.
Hmm.
One, the quote unquote woke people that never voted in 2016.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, they're like, "Oh yeah, anybody but Trump." Uh, Two is the people that voted for Trump and might have not benefited, and so they're
Hmm.
like, "All right, maybe I made a mistake." And then three, it's not Hillary.
Yeah,
That hatred isn't
exactly.
there.
Yeah.
And so those three factors in itself, I think, will give Trump a terrible night. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't think we'll have a projection,
Mhm. Oh,
but
not even a
I
projected winner?
not on election night. There's just no way. No
Really?
way. There's going to be so much uncertainty with the mail-in ballots and everything else. I guarantee the media will be afraid to call it that night.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, CNN is done with that man, so they might even they might even call it early. But no, I agree, man. It's definitely. I mean, I don't want to say entertaining because people's lives are in the balance, but there,
Agreed.
there, it will be. It's not going to be boring to sit back and watch
It'll
after
be
I
a
take.
giant shit show.
Exactly, yeah, man. I don't, I don't have to worry about my own election or anything. I can be a private citizen and a bystander. So I'm looking forward to just sit back and see what takes place.
Uh, Caleb, it's an hour and 20 minutes. I thank you for coming on, giving me perspective on a lot of things, and kind of telling me your story about the election and when you ran. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. Um, I would
Yeah.
love to have you on again after the election, and we can kind of dissect it a little bit. And then I would love to hear about your business as well, man. It's been a while since we really talked and caught up.
Yeah, man, we'll definitely catch up. But I appreciate you having me, man. It was definitely a great time talking about these uncertain times. But yeah, man, just let me know and we'll get something on the calendar.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you. And we'll talk later, man.
All right, man. Take it easy.
See ya.